Hi, welcome back. This is the second video, continuing from the one on putting up tomato trellises. This one is about transplanting tomato seedlings, and both of these videos, again, are about tasks that happen on start of season work days in our community garden. So again, the two main goals of these lessons were, or the two main objectives rather. Garden volunteers will be able to accurately summarize the process for putting up tomato trellises with access to slides if needed orally or in writing. So that's what we covered in the previous video. And then now we're going to look at the second one. Garden volunteers will be able to summarize the process of transplanting tomato seedlings with access to slides if needed orally or in writing. So again, all of this is intended to be posted on our website so that volunteers could look at it on the actual work days without needing to necessarily memorize this information. Okay, so we're talking about the second major tomato task for workdays, transplanting seedlings. For mental work, you need to count how many seedlings you have of each variety and then how many spots there are for the plants, and then do some math to figure out how many we should plant of each variety and lay them out by the trellises. Then we're ready for the physical work. So we need to find a spot at the edge of a trellis or 24 inches from the previous seedling and dig a hole. Gently remove the seedling, loosen up the root ball with your fingers, and then lay the seedling in the hole at an angle, fill in the hole with soil, label it, and water it. Okay, so we're going to break that down a little more. On this slide, we're looking down from above like an aerial view. So there's a couple things to notice. First of all, some things probably happened in between the last video and this video. So we put up the trellises, which are represented by this black line. And then everywhere in the garden we use irrigation, so that's represented by this reddish line. Somebody would have laid that down, and that's kind of a process in itself, so we'll talk about that in a different video. And then there should be this black dark gray rather, weed fabric, which we put down in the garden because we don't really have enough volunteers to keep on top of the weeds. And this weed fabric really helps with that. So we put it down anywhere we don't want things to grow, and then we put mulch or hay down on top of that. So make sure that this has all been laid down before you start planting. So here are the seedlings. If you remember from the last video, a trellis is 16 feet long or 192 inches. Plants need 24 inches between them, or 3 of those trellis squares. If you don't remember what that looks like, I'll show you in a minute, but the trellis is kind of like a grid of roughly squares. So every 3 squares we put a plant. And we plant them on alternate sides of the trellis. So if you divide a 192 by 24, you get 8 spaces. And then we also plant on both sides of the trellis, like I said, and they should be staggered as shown. So if you count all this up, it means that you can fit 17 plants total on a single trellis. Okay, so if you'll remember, this is our map from the last video. Let's apply our knowledge to the map. So in this case, we have 4 trellises, which are set up by themselves. And then we have 4 more trellises that are laid out end to end. So we can do some simple math to figure out how many plants we have room for. So we have 4 trellises alone, and 17 plants fit on a single trellis. So how many plants can we fit on those 4 trellises? If you want to pause the video and do the math, fine, or if you just want to watch, that's good too. So 17 plants times 4 trellises equals 68 plants. So for the trellises that are side by side, one of the spots is shared between them, so we can fit 33 plants along the whole stretch. In our garden map, we have 2 of these stretches. So how many plants do you think we can fit there? So again, if you want to pause the video, go ahead, or if you just want to follow along, that's good too. 33 plants times 2 trellis stretches equals 66 plants. And then last of all, how many plants can we fit total for this year in the garden? And again, pause if you like, otherwise just follow along. So 68 plus 66 is 134. So we have room for 134 plants. Okay, so here's a little more work for you. We have room for 134 plants, and let's just say we have 15 varieties, and we planted a lot of extras of each in the greenhouse. So how many should we plant of each variety if we want the same number of each? So pause the video if you like to figure this out, otherwise just stay tuned. So 134 divided by 15 varieties equals about 9 of each, and then we can give the rest of them away. This doesn't have to be exact, but basically we want to avoid a situation where someone just kind of goes in order and plants everything without thinking about it, and then we end up with only like 3 varieties of tomato. We want to try to have a few of each of the different kinds that we bought. Okay, so now let's look at the physical work of transplanting. So let's run through the steps here. First you dig a hole, and you'll see how deep it needs to be in a minute. Then you gently remove the seedling. This can be done by taking the little plastic label and sort of inserting it between the soil and the plastic and jiggling it around a little bit, moving it around the edge so that you can loosen things up. Then it should slide right out if you gently pull the stem up and out. Next, you can loosen up the root ball just by squeezing it gently with your fingers. Don't go overboard, just gently. And then you are going to lay the seedling in the hole that you made at an angle. This hole should be deep enough so that you can cover part of the stem with soil, 1/3 to 1/2. I know that sounds a little weird, but we'll explain why in a minute. Then you're going to cover it with more soil and put a label in it and water it. So usually there's one of those plastic labels for each little 4-pack of plants. So you'll probably need to write some more. I mean, we have magic markers that we use, and we also have these grease pencils that are really good, that are very water resistant. So just make sure each seedling that you plant is labeled with the variety of tomato. And watering can be done all at once after you've planted a row or so of seedlings. So you're probably wondering why we plant a seedling at an angle. Minnesota has a really short growing season, and tomato plants need a strong root system to flourish. All the little tiny fuzzy hairs along the stem will turn into roots if they're covered with soil. So we could dig a really deep hole, and deep enough to cover about 1/3 to 1/2 of the stem, but it's easier to place the seedling at a slight angle so that 1/3 to 1/2 of the stem is covered this way, and then sort of not bend very gently. We don't want to break it, but just kind of coax the rest of the plant slightly vertical, and then all those tiny hairs will turn into strong roots, and the rest of the plant, even if it might look slightly crooked at first, very soon with the sun shining on it, it's going to grow straight up. So let's review a little bit with some of the mistakes that people might make with the plants. First, planting too many of a variety. We do want to make sure that we have a little bit of each kind that we ordered. Planting on the same side of the trellis. If you saw in that overhead view, we want to switch sides back and forth. Using the wrong spacing, again, we want to do 24 inches or every 3 squares on the grid. Not planting at an angle. This has happened. It seems to work out okay, but just to try to make it as likely as possible that the plant will thrive, try to remember to do this. Remember to label each plant so we know if there's a particular variety that everyone loves, we want to know what it was. And again, we really don't want people to get hurt or dehydrated or to think of gardening, as a overly arduous or difficult task. Please take breaks. We always have water and food at the garden, so don't work until you're too tired or feel obligated to do anything that's too hard for you. So here are 2 gardeners in action. So can you notice 3 things that they're doing right based on what we talked about? You can pause the video and look at the picture if you want, or you can just follow along. So one thing you can notice that they are labeling each variety, which is wonderful. Then the spacing is perfect. You can see that the plants are every 3 grid divisions, or every 24 inches. And you can see that they're alternating sides, going back and forth. So we can't really see that the angle is right, and we can't tell if they counted to make sure that they have the right number of each variety, and we don't really know if they're taking breaks, but let's assume so. Okay, so to end, we have a quiz, and no worries, it's open book. So please write a summary of the steps for putting up trellises. So that was in the first video, so you can go back and look at that, look at the slides to review. Just a short paragraph or a list of bullet points would be great. And then just write the same thing, a brief summary of steps for transplanting the seedlings. And again, look back at the slides if you would like. If you're with other people watching this, or if this is being delivered in a class, people would work on it together. And then the last thing is there's a quiz. It's not supposed to be intimidating, it's just for fun. That PDF of that quiz is available on my website. So if you want to try that out, go ahead. And then you can check your work when you finish. The answers are provided. So that's all we have for today. The next step, if you live in Minnesota or you live in the St. Cloud area, would be to mark off the Saturdays in May to come help. We would love to have you. We will post a copy of this slideshow on our website here. And we also, I have a job aid that lists all the steps to kind of remind you of what needs to happen. So on the work days, if you come to volunteer, you could look at the presentation or at the job aid if you forget anything. Okay, so we reached the end. Thank you so much again for watching these 2 videos. I hope that you will consider volunteering either in our garden or another garden. It's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And wherever you are, have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.